Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome to Wilshire in Washington. I'm Ted Johnson here with my co-host Megan Carberry of MeganCarberry.com and Teresa Valdez-Klein of TeresaCentric.com. Good morning, Megan and Teresa.
Good morning, Ted.
We have Jay Rosen with us. Thank you very much for being here. Jay is on the faculty of New York University's Journalism Institute. He's been there since 1986. He's also the author of the award-winning weblog PressThink.org about journalism and its ideals. And he has also been instrumental in a number of pro-am reporting projects, including newassignment.net and the citizen journalism project offthebus.net, which is done with the Huffington Post. Jay, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
We were just talking about the election cycle and whether this resolved any of the tensions between bloggers and traditional journalists on issues which you've written about of ethics. And I'm just wondering, do you see these two communities being a lot more fused together after this long campaign?
Well, it certainly is the case that lots of people in the traditional press are now authors of blogs themselves, and I think political reporters especially follow some of the better political blogs very closely, and so there is a kind of merging of the two in political journalism, but that doesn't mean that they've completely accepted each other's ideas. I think the traditional press was still much more likely to value being inside the campaign bubble and to see that as their mission. In fact, I learned they have an expression. I didn't even know this expression, but they call being on the bus or on the plane with the campaign being in the Obama bubble. The Obama bubble is the whole operation, or you could be in the McCain bubble. And I think that is still very much the mainstream media's niche, as it were. And this idea that you kind of follow the campaign around and you're there on the road is something that bloggers don't really do and couldn't do because of the enormous expense involved in doing that.
We're talking. I think it was upwards of. I think it could be $3,000 a week for a news organization.
More than that.
Yeah.
I think it's more like $10,000 a week.
Yeah. I can't help but thinking, what happens going forward as the Obama administration starts. Again, you're going to have now this White House bubble, and obviously some of the mainstream news organizations are going to have an advantage. How does a blogger go about breaking stories and covering the administration where you don't have the candidate interacting out in the field and perhaps don't have as many shots at scoops?
Well, a lot depends on how the Obama team runs the White House and what their press and communication policy turns out to be. Recently, in fact, this week, the press is starting to suggest that Obama is taking a page from Bush in his press relations, which I think is way overdrawn and basically a phony narrative. But in the degree that Obama and his crew decide to be more open and more transparent, release more information, interact on change.gov, make the priorities of the administration clear, do what they say, then the quote-unquote inside story is less and less important, even though reporters might scramble for it. So a lot has to do with how the government operates. The way the Bush government operated was not only to keep everything secret, to not talk to the press very much, to diss the press and kind of push it to the side, but actually to try and make the entire government as opaque as possible. And we may see some of that with Obama. It's possible. Those are powers, in a way, that the new president may decide he wants. But if they go towards the more open and transparent route, which has advantages and risks, then the inside information is less important. We also have to remember that the news organizations that did the best in covering Bush during the most difficult and intense period in the run-up to the war and during the war, those who succeeded were the ones who didn't have any access, who didn't have sources in the White House, who weren't talking to Karl Rove, and built up their knowledge of what was going on from the outside in. So that's an important thing to remember as well.
Yeah, I remember it was. I think it was the Knight Ridder Bureau that broke.
Knight Ridder Washington Bureau, and later McClatchy. Lots of the big players inside the White House wouldn't talk to them because they didn't think they were very important. So they had to go to mid-level officials in the agencies and executive branch, and it was that allowed them to get more of the story. Interestingly, the same thing has been true in like the mortgage crisis. If you talk to people on the ground, lenders, local bankers, mortgage brokers in cities and towns, you could get the real story. If you tried to talk to the CEOs of the big mortgage companies and finance companies, you wouldn't learn a thing.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point, because it actually speaks to the question of so many people actually were predicting this crisis actually for quite a few years. But again, it was, if you talk to local realtors or if you talk to sometimes even your friends and neighbors, they would say these prices can't continue to go up, and it really does concern me.
Yeah, there's actually, if the people at the center, at the top, running the operation are not reality-based themselves, if they're in a bubble, then it's highly likely that the journalism based on those and access to those people is not going to be very reality-based either. And the chance of your reporting being highly distorted is actually greater. In the Bush White House, the closer you were to Bush and Cheney and Rove and people inside the executive chamber, the more likely you were to be wrong.
Because the closer you were, the more concern you had of losing your access?
I don't think it's so much that. That's what people say. It's more that you, after a while, you absolutely believe that the people inside know what's going on. They know something different than what it appears, and you are sucked into their illusions.
Well, Jay, what signs do you see that are encouraging that Obama will be different?
Well, a simple sign this week was the hiring of Jay Carney by Joe Biden. It's not that Carney is such an amazing journalist. I thought he was kind of an annoying reporter myself. But it certainly signals that the Vice President's office intends to take a completely different line to communication. With Vice President Cheney, much of the time the press didn't even know where he was, let alone travel with him, let alone ask him any questions. So that right there tells you a different model for the Vice Presidency is underway. Similarly, with Change.gov, the new site of the Obama transition team, you can see the beginning of a strategy in which you don't necessarily engage the press so much as the conduit to the larger public, but you release information directly to the public. And that might be a loss for reporters, but it wouldn't necessarily be a loss for citizens.